Dakorien Moore, the #1 wide receiver and #4 overall prospect in the 2025 class, has decommitted from LSU. Now, he'd been locked in with the Tigers since last August. And before we get into the why, let's hit on the who. Blair, what makes Moore such a highly sought-after prospect?
A two-time state champion in the vaunted Texas 6A classification. He's an electric receiver with tremendous ball skills and burst. He has averaged over 20 yards per reception as a junior last year. And our scouts love the fluidity and the explosiveness as a route runner, truly the epitome of wide receiver #1.
All right, that's who he is. Let's talk more about why he is in the news and bring on national recruiting analyst Mike Roach. Mike, we're going to talk about the schools that he is now interested in and conversely interested in him. But first, what happened with LSU?
This feels like it's been coming for a while. I know that when he initially made his commitment to LSU back in, I believe it was August of 23, he had kind of indicated that that's where he wanted to be. He loved the future wide receiver there. He loved the development. But as it went throughout the fall and into the spring, it started to feel like this was kind of an inevitability at some point. Dakorien visited LSU on a couple of occasions, but there was more and more increased talk behind the scenes that it was kind of a matter of when and not if. And in fact, a couple of weeks ago, I started to hear some real strong talk from people behind the scenes that this was probably coming. I guess what surprises me a little bit is him eliminating LSU completely. A lot of times when you see kids decommit, they'll keep that initial school in there and still give them a chance. But, I haven't been able to pinpoint exactly what it was, but I know there were a lot of questions about many facets of the LSU program, not only Dakorien, but some people in his family and around him.
He officially has a schedule that includes Ohio State, Oregon, and Texas. Mike, the one school there that has been making a lot of noise with wide receivers, specifically in recent years, is the Buckeyes. What have you been hearing about Ohio State and their chances to land more?
Well, there's a lot for them to sell. I mean, Brian Hartline probably has the best resume of anybody who can recruit wide receivers, and he doesn't often miss on those wide receiver one types. I think that, once he made his initial commitment to LSU, Ohio State backed off a little bit, and they weren't being talked about as much as Texas and Oregon. They re-engaged early in the year, and they've made a really strong push since that point. I think that what they've got is a proven track record of consistency when it comes to development, and they've got an offense that shows it will feature those types of receivers. So I think that they have a lot of those things going for them. It kind of established consistency that kids look for.
Meanwhile, the Ducks have been somewhat quiet, I would say, to start this cycle, currently at number 18. That's just compared to the hot streak that they've been having on the trail as of late. So where do things stand with Moore in Oregon?
I'm not sure there's a staff in this recruitment that's put in more work than Oregon. And that's from top to bottom as far as establishing relationships, not only with Dakorien, but with his mother, with several members of his family, his coaches, teammates, all those sorts of things. I mean, they have really gone all out to see if they can land the #1 receiver. I think that they've got a great shot that, they've been up to Oregon a couple of times. They love it up there. It used to be tough to go from Texas to Oregon. It was, there weren't direct flights. There are now direct flights from Dallas to Eugene. And so it's made travel a little easier. I think distance is still somewhat of a concern for Oregon in this one. But, I think a big thing that they could do this year, and of course, I do think Dakorien will probably have his decision made by this point when the season starts, but they can start showing guys like him what they can do with players like Evan Stewart, who are so well known around this area. They can really become a factor in the future. But I think for this recruitment, they do a really strong job when they host kids on campus. And to be frank, a lot of these kids grow up. We're in the era now where everybody grew up an Oregon fan. Everybody grew up wanting to wear those uniforms. And so I think that plays in their favor a lot as well.
You look at their quarterback depth chart, you see a big name on there, Dante Moore. You can only dream about that connection, Moore to Moore, if he were to end up in Eugene. Mike, I do want to ask you about the in-state Longhorns. They have a lot of the buzz right now. What do you make of Texas and their chances to reel him in?
Each of these three schools have kind of had their moment in the sun. When I talked to somebody near Dakorien in the early spring, it was like, hey, this is Oregon's race to lose at this point. And, mid-spring, it was Ohio State. This is kind of Texas's time. They've hosted him a couple of times on unofficial visits lately. He has a lot of family in the Austin area. His mother's originally from Austin, and a lot of teammates down there. Colin Simmons, the 5-star from Duncanville, who just signed last year, among them, a lot of friends. And I think Steve Sarkisian's shown, especially with the development they had this year with Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell, Jordan Whittington, 3 receivers drafted. That offense is lethal when it comes to throwing the ball. Also, I think they've shown he can fit, he can develop, and he can stay at home and do it. That's always their strongest pitch is, to stay home and to be able to do it in state. And I think if you're looking at the long-term play, their best pitch they can make is what benefits do you have after football as a graduate in Texas if you want to live in Texas? I think that they have a strong network of graduates and amongst the state. And so I think that that's a big pitch they're going to be able to make as well.
To be the leaders in the clubhouse right now, but I want to know, who are the dark horse programs in this now wide open recruitment?
I wouldn't call it wide open. Dakorien had a kind of a vaguely worded tweet when he decommitted, and where he said he wouldn't be considering any recruitment offers. And I think what he meant by that was nobody knew. No new schools coming in, even though he's decommitting. It's these 3 schools, and that's it. And I think that, if I had to handicap them, I do like Texas slightly at the moment, but I think official visit seasons can change all of that. And going forward, we'll see kind of week to week what the buzz is coming out of those trips.
Mike, I want to go back to LSU. It always stings to lose a 5-star player, especially one that you had committed for a long time and a player that's number 1 at his position. Where does this leave the Tigers class, which dropped out of the top 5 in the national recruiting rankings?
Still a really strong class overall. We've got the number 1 overall player in Bryce Underwood committed, and I think that they've got some standing with some other players. I wonder if this makes them turn up the heat on a guy like Khalil Lockett from the state of Texas, from the Dallas area, very close in proximity to Dakorien Moore and close in proximity to the rankings as the number 2 receiver in the country. This is a guy that has LSU among his finalists, along with Florida State, Texas A&M. Those are the schools kind of vying for him. So I think LSU made a really big impression on Khalil Lockett in the spring when he came down and visited for the spring game. Coming out of that visit, I really liked where they stood. I think things have evened up a little bit more coming into the summer, but I think they can make a strong impression when they host him, I believe, here in a couple weeks on May 31st.
Yeah, and certainly hope having a guy like Bryce Underwood already in the fold can help bring in some wide receiver prospects. So certainly not over yet for this LSU class. Mike, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. You can check out more of his work at 247sports.com and follow this story as it continues to develop. We're about to get into the thick of visit season, so make sure that you are keeping it locked in to 247sports.com.